Brew Strong is brought to you by morebeer.com, where a man can brew like a man.
Brewers, it's time for the beer radio you've been looking for. This is the show that dispels myths, tackles the toughest topics, and makes no apologies for geeking out on beer. Hosted by two guys that drink before they think, Jamil Zainashev and John Palmer. This is Brew Strong.
All right. Yeah. Well, you know, it's been a long weekend with the long shot.
It has.
We had a good time.
Very fun weekend.
Yeah.
I don't think I'm on yet, but...
It's great. The nice thing about that is we see a lot of people come up Southern California, you know, Push and Sven, they came up.
Yeah.
And...
see a lot of friends from Northern California. I mean, it's a great.
A lot of people come in from all around. They get a chance to tour around. You know, a lot of them come up and they'll spend an extra day on one end or the other. They go around to the local haunts. Maybe go out to someplace like Downtown Joe's.
Yep.
You know, that's out in Napa. That's pretty close to here. And go by, see Colin Kaminsky, see Joe himself. Tell him how much they like. The place and the beers there and the food there, that's a good place.
It's always a treat to come up and get some really good beer like that.
Yeah, one of our sponsors, and they, you know, if you get a chance, go out to Downtown Joe's, tell them how much you appreciate them supporting the Brewing Network and the programming that we do. And if you don't get a chance to see Colin or Joe there, you just go ahead and email them even at info@downtownjoes.com.
Yeah, they're good folks. Like to hear from you.
Say, hey, thanks for supporting the Brewing Network. We love it, and you know, we're gonna, you know, come by Downtown Joe's and have a beer.
That's right.
And you know, one of the things about Downtown Joe's and Colin is he's real passionate about water profiles and how that affects his beers and the different styles of beers he brews. And,
that's right.
You know, his water changes quite a bit during the course of a season.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, especially in the spring when they start switching from rivers to wells and so on in the summer. Yeah.
Same thing happens for me up where I live. You know, during the summer when the rivers start running low, they can't draw as much off the rivers, so they switch to wells. And during you know, the winter and the early part of the spring when the snow starts to melt, we get a lot of river runoff, and they go ahead and actually I met a guy from Southern California, Michael, the other day, and we were talking, and probably the water he uses down in Southern California, it comes from from the rivers up here, so he's probably using the same water I'm using. You know, we're very close to it.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things we're talking about water is because this is the show number 4 in our Watergasm.
That's right.
We're going to, you know, kind of wrap up this discussion of water. We've got the 3 shows out there.
Yeah, we've gotten a lot of reader questions, or I keep saying reader, listener questions. A lot of good emails we've gotten over the last couple of weeks asking, you know, some follow-up questions, asking us to clarify a few details. So that's what we're going to do this show is go through those and hopefully tie all the loose ends together for you.
Right. We want this to be a good education, you know, and complete. And obviously, if people are asking these questions, we didn't quite...
Yeah, didn't quite nail it. And if one person asks the questions, I'm sure, you know, lots of other people have the same one.
Probably thousands out there.
Yeah.
You know, got the same, wondering the same sort of thing. And so we thought we'd go over those questions and you know, fill these in, and the Watergasm Palooza will be done. And you can refer back to these 4 shows anytime. All right, so let's kick it off here with Tom LaBelle's, I think is how his last name is pronounced. Yeah, he had some confusion over adding chalk to his water or to his mash, and he wasn't sure why he couldn't seem to hit his RA target. And what was going on there? Why would he have difficulty with that? Why can't?
Well, he was using
chalk?
the spreadsheet that's it's available on howtobrew.com, and in the spreadsheet, you can add you can iterate how much of each salt that you add to the water, and see the result in terms of the residual alkalinity that you're building. And he knows he was trying to brew a dark beer, and trying to add alkalinity, and then the spreadsheet tells you need to add 100 parts per million of alkalinity to hit this RA. Well, he was adding chalk to get it, and couldn't understand why the number kept changing. He couldn't seem to hit that amount. He'd put in 100 parts per million worth of alkalinity from chalk, and then the number would change. And the reason is because when you add chalk or calcium carbonate, you're also adding calcium. The calcium adds to the hardness, and so it's like taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back in terms of trying to add alkalinity with chalk. Likewise, if you're trying to add hardness to your water and adding chalk, it's like taking 1 step forward and 2 steps back, because it's really got twice as much alkalinity per gram as it does hardness. So yeah, that was the problem. That when you're trying to add just alkalinity, and if your sodium levels are low, then add some sodium bicarbonate, some baking soda, because the sodium really doesn't enter into any of the calculations, and you add quite a bit of bicarbonate that way.
And so. What's the way to determine what you should be using to add residual alkalinity? Increase that number.
Yeah.
What's how do I look at my water and decide, and the style of beer I'm brewing to decide what I would add?
Yeah. Look at your water report, what you're starting out with. Generally, I think in a lot of areas of the country, people's water is not very hard. It probably has 40 parts per million of calcium. And as we talked about a couple shows ago, you're looking for anywhere from 50 to 100 parts per million of calcium is better, is more optimum given the other brewing reactions that go on, in terms of yeast flocculation and clarity and so on. So, if you're starting out with just like 40 parts per million of calcium or 30, and you're trying to build up the water, and if you're trying to brew a darker beer, and the spreadsheet tells you need to add alkalinity, well, I would add part of that as calcium carbonate, because you need to get your calcium up. You want to get to those minimums for good fermentation. So you would add a little bit of calcium carbonate. Of course, again, like I said, it's going to be 1 step forward, 2 steps back kind of thing, and so you're going to want to see what you add, say 2 grams to your water, and see how that changes the number. Once you get up, your calcium level gets up to say 70, 75. Then you really don't need to worry about adding any more calcium. Now you want to focus just on the alkalinity that you need for your calculation, and there is where I would add baking soda. Because now you're holding your calcium steady, and you're raising your alkalinity, and you can dial it in that way. Depending on the style of beer you're brewing, you may want to change your sulfate to chloride ratio, and there again you could add calcium chloride, calcium sulfate to manipulate that, or but again you're going to need to take that added addition into account, and look at your alkalinity levels again. And the best way to address that, when you're building up your hardness again, you're going to want to strictly add sodium bicarbonate to counter that.
Okay. Well, and Mark Myers, he had a question on how high in RA you would want to go. So on the nomograph that you have, as far as or in the spreadsheet, you're figuring out based on kind of the color of the beer, the SRM of the beer. The darker the beer, the more RA you want, right?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, is there a limit to that? Are you
Yeah, there's definitely a limit.
You should stop, because a lot of times in competition, I'll taste beers and people have clearly gone past some sort of limit, and the thing tastes chalky or minerally, or it's really excessive.
Right. Yeah, I had a couple yesterday, kind of like that. This whole model that we're talking about in terms of residual alkalinity in beer color, it's strictly a model based on looking at data, looking at trends, and nature's not linear. So what you get is when you design a recipe for a Russian Imperial Stout, and you're putting in lots of dark malts and special roast and a little extra dark chocolate malt and some of this malt and so on, to get lots of interesting flavors in that beer. You calculate the beer color, and there's several models out there, and they're all similar. But you calculate a beer color of like 70 SRM or even higher. Well, the thing is, it's actually physically impossible to measure a beer that dark. Anytime you go over a measurement of 30 SRM, the let's say a beer color measures 40. Mm-hmm. Let's say it measures 40 in a test. Well, they literally can't get enough light through the beer sample to take that measurement. So what they do is they dilute it by half. Mm-hmm. And then after they dilute it, they multiply their result by 2, to compensate. So anytime you're brewing a really dark beer, the calculation that you're relying on to tell you how dark that beer is really going to be is a strict approximation, and that takes into account multiple dilutions that they do in the lab. So it's not very accurate. I mean, and therefore, when it comes to calculate how much a residual alkalinity you need to balance a beer that's that dark, I found that 250, 300 parts per million residual alkalinity is enough. Mm-hmm. I've brewed,
no matter how dark the beer.
Yeah, no matter how dark the beer, because it's not. These aren't strictly salts or chemicals that we're dealing with. It's an organic solution with organic buffering agents and proteins and so on that are driving the pH, and they only go so far. I mean, they're not going to be. You could brew a beer that's 100% black malt, and it would still only have a pH of about 5.2 or 4 or something. I mean, it's no matter how dark it is, it's not going to drive the pH that low. So you don't need to go overboard when you're adding alkalinity to compensate.
Because there is some built-in buffering in the malt, and
yeah.
And I would also say, as far as color goes, color of a beer can be driven by multiple things. So not only the highly kilned malts, which add color in a certain way and add a different balance to than versus adding a whole bunch of Crystal 40.
Right.
I mean, that's you could get two different, or the same beer color, essentially, and through two different methods, and you'd need a different residual alkalinity for both of those, right?
That's right. Yeah, we kind of touched on that last show, but yeah, the dark malts or roasted malts have a different chemical group, a higher melanoidin group than the kilned malts, the crystal malts. And so even though you can generate the same color using the SRM test, the actual acidity of that solution and the actual degree to which those compounds buffer the pH is different between roasted malts and kiln malts. So that's another reason that the spreadsheet and the nomograph give you kind of a high and a low residual alkalinity value, based on, even for the same beer color. Those, here's the low end and here's the high end, because it's an approximation. If you're brewing a dark beer primarily with kilned malts, then I would use the lower number for residual alkalinity. If you're brewing that same colored beer mostly with roasted malts, then I would go with the higher RA number for that SRM.
Well, and also, to further complicate matters, to further make this a more mysterious adjustment, is the fact that the formulas for calculating the SRM of a beer are not 100%. So there's a number of calculations out there. I use the Morey color calculation, and you can use a different one. And I've seen it as much as double the SRM by picking another formula. So
when you're down in the low numbers, for pale beers, all the formulas all the models are pretty close, and you can also approximate beer colors simply by multiplying the pounds by the Lovibond. I mean, malt color units. Down the pale beers, you're pretty close that way, but once you start getting into the browns and so on and higher, that's when the models start diverging a bit.
Right.
And if you look at
and that's the critical point that we're talking about.
I mean, you look in Designing Great Beers and articles Ray Daniels did back in Brewing Techniques on beer color. He had actual data, and I think I mimicked that or I copied that in How to Brew and cited it. But there's a lot of diversity once you get up into the higher colors between what the perceived color is versus the measured number, and the models. They're drawing a line, trying to fit the data to a curve, and there's a lot of scatter up at the high numbers. So, it's an approximation, and so that's why I definitely don't recommend going over, generally 250 parts per million residual alkalinity, and only in the most, the darkest Russian Imperial Stouts would I suggest going up to 300. I wouldn't recommend going over that.
Right, and with all these approximations in there, what you need to do is not hold this as absolutely strict. Okay, the spreadsheet tells me, and I know a lot of people, they have a lot of respect for the research that you've done and the spreadsheet and all that, and so they say, well, if Palmer says this requires 170 parts per million, that's what I'm going with.
Right.
And if the taste of the beer is not quite right, then you may need to adjust. And it's a starting point, and for that recipe you're gonna need to tweak it, and maybe you need to go higher, maybe you need to go less. It just depends. Try it at what the follow the spreadsheet. That's a good way to logically get a starting point rather than just wildly guessing. Here's solid advice that should get you real close. Maybe it is exactly the right number, but depending on the recipe, depending on other factors in your water, depending on how accurate your color formula, you may go a little less, see how that works, or go a little higher, see how that works. If you're not getting the results that are desired, right?
Right. Yeah, that's where the brewer's art comes into play. The science can only take you so far, and then you've got to trust your instincts, trust your palate, and trust your senses when you're brewing that beer to really dial it in.
Right, to answer really what the correct number is. Again, it's an art. It's the science gets you pretty close, and then the difference between, I think, a really great brewer and brewery versus just a good one is taking that art point and learning from the beer, getting feedback from the beer on how you should adjust your water as well.
Right.
You can get close, but then even Colin, he was doing all his calculations the way that all the science said,
right,
and he wasn't getting quite the result that he wanted, and so he made some adjustments to that. And that change, really was the difference in his beer being just good to being really great.
Right.
And So, I was very impressed with just how that one changed, really, because he really didn't change much else, and his beers, markedly improved.
Yeah.
So that was kind of exciting. I'll tell you what. Why don't we take a short break, and when we get back, we will get into more questions about water. And if you have them on the live chat, type them in. Justin will write them down for us. Back after this.
Brew smart. Brew strong. This is Brew Strong.
Look at you, brewing on this fine summer day.
Sun's out, the kids are having fun, and I just got my shipment for more beer.
But aren't you going to run into temp control issues with your ferment? Those yeast are going to fry.
Normally I would, but this is temperature control month at More Beer, and they're having a huge sale on all sorts of products to help me keep my beer cool while the yeast do their thing.
Really?
Yeah, like these things here. With this stopper thermal well, this firm wrap carboy heater, and this temp controller for that old fridge over there, I can keep my beer at exactly the temp I want when I want. No more high ferments, no more unhappy yeast.
Man, I got to check this stuff out.
You better hurry. The sale is only for this month.
Well, alrighty. Point me to your computer. And kegerator. I'm thirsty.
Right over there. Go ahead.
May is temperature control month at More Beer. Come join them for huge savings on things that you need to make beer this summer. Visit morebeer.com and click on the picture of Regan keeping cool in a swimming pool. Temperature control month, only at Beer and More Beer.
Downtown Joe's, located in the historic Oberon building in beautiful downtown Napa, California, offers an award-winning brew pub experience from 8:30 a.m. to 1 a.m. every day. For 15 years at the corner of 2nd and Main, Downtown Joe's has been voted Best Night Spot 7 times and Best Brew Pub for the last 4 years in a row. Brewmaster Colin Kaminsky's handcrafted ales, like his Tailwagon Amber Ale and Catherine the Great Imperial Stout, are the perfect accent to riverside dining, live music, and a relaxing outdoor patio. Don't miss the Beer of the Month, special rotating taps, and happy hour all day Mondays. Visit downtownjoes.com to make reservations, peruse their extensive calendar of events, or just read more about their fantastic beers. Come enjoy the fine beer, food, and music. Downtown Joe's, the award-winning brew pub where you'll feel at home.
White Labs, your source for maltose mowing monsters, announces the White Labs Platinum lineup for 2009. Looking for out-of-the-ordinary yeast to make the best beer possible? The Platinum strains from White Labs are only available for a limited time and make your homebrew stand out. Through February, find Australian Ale, Essex Ale, and Dusseldorf Alt yeast. March and April, it's Nottingham Ale, Abbey 4, and Mexican Lager yeast. And May through June, don't miss Premium Bitter Ale, Belgian Wit 2, and Belgian Bastogne Ale yeast. Keep up with all the great yeasts in the White Labs Platinum program at whitelabs.com, where you can also join the White Labs Customer Club. Brew with the freshest and most unique yeast with the White Labs 2009 Platinum strains. White Labs. It's all in the vial.
Live. Beer Radio. The Brewing Network.
The Brewcasters.
If you're just starting, don't be discouraged by all this stuff. It's so easy.
Just throw it together.
Put some sugar and some water and some yeast in there.
Yeah.
It's beer.
Brewing Network.
Back to your hosts, Jamil Zainasheff and John Palmer. Putting the testicles in technical. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're in part 4 of our water shows here. And
yeah, that's definitely my favorite riff from the whole the whole thing.
Yeah, testicles.
No, I mean, well, not the lyrics so much the music on that. I really like that.
Yeah, I love all the production on the Brewing Network. I think it's all high quality stuff.
It is.
Sometimes the talent is a little weak, but
especially this morning.
But then you guys make up for it, and I don't look so bad. So there. Yeah, we got a lot of questions on water, and when there was a time where I'm not sure if they're still doing it, but More Beer, they our sponsor also for the show, they were doing some Waters of the World type of kits. I think Colin was setting up blends of different salts that if you took RO water or distilled water and just threw in a packet of this to your water.
Right.
There you go. You've got the water of Dortmund or the water of Dusseldorf or something like that. And Burton-on-Trent. Somebody did ask, what constitutes Joel, I guess it was, what constitutes Dusseldorf water. I guess we were talking about the water of Munich, the water of Dusseldorf, the water
Dortmund,
of Dortmund, and the difference being, it's really going to depend on a lot of different factors. And the breweries themselves may not be using that water untreated. They may be making adjustments, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that area of Germany, there's a couple of big rivers going by, and they could be using river water, which would be, really soft, snow melt, kind of like it is around here. They could be switching to groundwater throughout the year. Geographically, Dusseldorf is pretty close to Dortmund,
right.
So the high, the high hardness and alkaline numbers of Dortmund is still relatively balanced, but that's most likely a groundwater source that's come from there. Dusseldorf may be very similar, or depending on what they use locally, because Cologne geographically is close by, and I know their water is fairly soft.
And then they have the Rhine runs from the Netherlands through to all the way through Germany down through so they get some major rivers through there. But it's interesting where the river travels. The river is going to pick up, and it's going to be different at one point in the source of the river through another, and same thing for well water. Somebody was asking about how do you is all well water the same?
Yeah,
the answer is going to be no. It depends on what the ground conditions are like. If the water is sitting, the aquifer is in limestone or chalk or granite or all sorts of different types of possible minerals dissolving in there.
That's right. Yeah, well water is going to vary a lot. Very widely depending on the geography. Like you say, there's a lot of regions in the U.S. that are old sea bottom, and you get a lot of limestone. You get a lot. That's why we have lots of alkalinity generally in our water. More older regions where you're talking about granite mountains, the water can be much softer, maybe have some high hardness to it. Appalachia and so on can be like that. But
even I know when people drill wells on their property, one neighbor to the next, maybe a 1,000 feet away, they hit a different aquifer, different level.
Yeah.
And, they have to go deeper.
Versus 200, yeah.
Yeah, and if you're off to one side and you miss the, the seam of water that's going through there, you end up, with a different layer, and all of a sudden, the water is completely different on two different properties that are really not that far away.
Right. Yeah, so that's why it's always good, if you're on a well system to take a sample and send it off to a place like Ward Labs, and
maybe if you got the money, maybe 4 times in a year to see if it's changing seasonally at all, because some of those they're fed by water percolating down through. Some of them are fed by different sources. And isn't it possible, if some wells can be even brackish?
Oh,
you
yeah.
can get close to the coastal areas.
Yeah, definitely.
You can get a brackish, or even inland. I imagine Great Salt Lake and all those sorts of things.
Yeah. Oh, Michigan's like that too. I mean, there's one of the largest salt mines in the world under Detroit.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there's lots of brackish water in Michigan, well water, and lots of iron too. I mean, I remember drinking iron water as a kid.
Rusted cars, you figure?
Yeah. It was. I mean, you'd find a pump or a spring out in the country, and it was just really minerally. So.
Yeah, so your well water is going to vary. Your river water is going to vary. All the water is going to vary.
Yeah.
And should you call on a Downtown Joe's? He was worrying about his water every day. So he was measuring his water and adjusting for it differently every day. Now, do you need to do that? I mean, maybe Colin does because he's in the business of
brewing every day. But I think you can probably for homebrewers you can take a couple rules of thumb. Understand where your water comes from. Does it come from snow melt? Does it come from a river?
Mm-hmm.
Does it come from wells? And then look at your local municipal water report, and they'll tell you on there where your water comes from throughout the year.
Mm-hmm.
And they may say in the summer we're drawing from wells, in the winter we're pulling from the rivers or the lake. And so with that information in mind, think of okay, they've published an average for me, and for instance, your calcium may run 20 to 60 as a range throughout the year. Well, think about
so if you bump it up by 40 parts per million, you no matter what time of the year, you're probably in the range, huh?
You're probably in the range, and you could also take it, drive that a little bit by saying, okay, when they're pulling from the river, it's probably down towards the 20 end. When they're pulling from the wells, it's probably by the 60. And and use that when you're brewing, time of year you're brewing, and
so maybe set up 2 water profiles for a given recipe, and it's per recipe.
Right.
And you'd say, well, if I'm brewing this in the summer, do this. If I'm brewing this in the winter, do that.
Right.
And then, in between, you can kind of average them out, and you'd be all right.
Yeah.
Or if the range is not so far, if you're in a place where the water, reports has a fairly narrow range for all these values, you can just do one and not worry about it. And slight shifts, the Bureau will turn out a little bit different, but it's not going to be radically different. It's going to be all right. Don't really stress about this. You don't have to be down to the last grain, the last part per billion.
Yeah.
It's going to be all right.
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, round your numbers off. I mean, even though it's calculating to a single digit or a tenth, round it up. I mean, the nearest tenth, the nearest 5, because you're working off averages, and brewing's a really robust system. We're trying to say, in general, water treatment can improve your beer, by helping you drive it in the proper direction. But again, you've got a lot of room to play with there. I mean, you're moving the system a little bit, but within where you're moving to, you got a lot of room. So it's not that exact a science,
right? And there's the science, but on top of that science, there's art.
That's right.
And the science will get you close, and then you need to use your senses and taste. And if it doesn't seem right, then you need to kind of rework the science or make some adjustments, and you'll be okay.
Yeah.
All right. So Brad Nixon had a question about how and why to add salts to the boil kettle. One of the things after we did the shows on the forum, there was some long post somebody did that. I read part of the way through it, and then I just I kind of and one of the things the guy got from it was, well, if you add gypsum to the boil kettle, it doesn't do anything. It's like, well, no, that's not really true, because I can tell you from my experience brewing with extracts that as an extract brewer, if you have a pale ale or an IPA, and to one of them you add a teaspoon of gypsum and the other you don't, the two beers taste quite different. The hop character seems totally different. So obviously it does have an effect. There may be other places along the point where you want to have your effect, but why don't we go back to, I think we covered this, but it seems confusing for people where you can make adjustments, and where you should, where you have to, where you don't, where you shouldn't. Mm-hmm. I mean, is there a place where you shouldn't make an adjustment, like the sparge water?
Yeah, it's not so much I shouldn't do it as it's not going to help that much, so you might as well not bother, kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, the whole theory, water adjustment, begins with the classic brewing cities. This city had this kind of water, and they developed this kind of beer style that complemented, that worked with it, and it's a really great tasting beer. This city had a much different profile, and they ended up developing a much different style of beer, using that water. So with that in mind, what we're doing, we're working on a couple levels with water adjustment. In general, we are trying to duplicate the general profile of that brewing city for that style of beer that we're trying to brew. But again, it's a very robust system. We just got to get in the ballpark. We don't have to get exactly what the numbers say, or what the list says, the numbers were. You just got to get in the ballpark. So to address the question, where and why do we make adjustments? Well, it's important to do it in the mash, because that's starting. That's the really starting out the whole beer is in the mash. So you want to make your calculations based on your mash water volume, and put those salts in, stir them in, and your mash pH should come out right, and you're off on the right foot. Then when it comes to sparge, generally people are sparging with relatively higher alkalinity water than the style they're trying to brew. Mm-hmm. So in that case, what you'd want to do is either dilute your sparge water with RO water or distilled water. If you're trying to brew a really pale beer, you might want to sparge with distilled water. And then, in the boil kettle, where these salts are much more soluble, now you can make up for the volume of sparge water that you sparged with, and put in another 3 or 5 gallons worth of salt to make up for the sparge volume, to get the total water profile the same as someone that was brewing in that classic city to start with. I mean, in these cities, they're brewing the local water. It has this profile of minerals in it, and they're brewing with that profile the whole way through. That water is getting boiled. The minerals are getting concentrated, and the beer comes out tasting great. Mm-hmm. So what we're doing is we're saying, okay, let's build that profile at the beginning in the mash. Let's kind of hold off on mineral additions for the sparge, because they don't tend to dissolve well, so it's kind of fruitless to put them in. Mm-hmm. And then make up for that profile in the boil kettle. Mm-hmm. So what we're starting to boil in the boil kettle is the same mineral profile that we would have had if we had this water naturally. Mm-hmm.
So because you didn't add to the sparge, because it doesn't dissolve very well,
right,
you're making up for it
in the boil kettle. Yeah, and then you start your boil, and it boils, and people have asked.
You don't need that water, that adjusted water, for the sparge, because you're just rinsing the sugars out.
Right, and generally the mash pH is not going to change that much. Mm-hmm. The only time it's really going to change significantly is when you're trying to brew a very pale beer with very alkaline water. Mm-hmm. Any other situation, it's not critical.
Right. Well, and as an extract brewer, what would people do now? The mash has already been created for them. It's got all sorts of minerals in it from wherever the extract was produced,
right?
And that mashed and concentrated down, and they've concentrated down the minerals as well. So you just reconstitute that with RO water or distilled or whatever. But the water that they've created with that mash, that isn't necessarily in that extract. That isn't necessarily the water that you want to emulate if you're making an English IPA or something like that, right? So you may still want to make some adjustments in there. You don't really know exactly what the mineral profile of that extract is, right?
Right.
You can have a pretty good guess if you know where it was produced, and you can even ask them. I suppose they could tell you. I bet you if you contact Brees and ask them what the water was during the mash that's used in there, they probably tell you. Good people out there.
That's right.
You could assume from there, and you make the rest of your adjustment in the boil kettle. So if you're an extract brewer, that doesn't mean you
don't do a water adjustment. I mean, it means you've got to understand what your starting point is, and what you're going to do. I mean, if you're brewing an extract recipe and you're putting in your local tap water, and your local tap water is an alkaline tap water, then it probably would be good to add some form of calcium to your boil kettle to help. Assuming that you start out with a balanced or a good residual alkalinity in the extract itself. If you were to dilute that up with distilled water, let's assume that wort has the right RA for whatever style that you're going to brew with it. But if you reconstitute that extract with alkaline water, local tap water, then you probably want to balance that alkalinity that you've from your tap water with additional calcium, bring it back into balance that way. See what I'm saying? If you, on the other hand, if you build up your extract worts with distilled water, you don't necessarily have to add anything to the water to balance it back out. But let's say you brew that beer, you try that beer, you taste it, and think, it needs something. It's not quite as crisp as I want, or it doesn't have quite the character I want. Then you've brewed this beer once with a certain method, what it's lacking, and now you can tweak it. You can add some calcium sulfate, you can add some calcium chloride to manipulate the flavors, or you brew that extract beer and it's not as clear, the clarity of it isn't as good as you would hope for. Again, calcium can help clarity. So you can say to yourself, when I brew this extract batch, I'm going to need to add more calcium in the boil kettle to help my clarity. And that's also going to have, say, this effect on the flavor. I mean, you've got to look at that. You may want to add additional calcium using two sources, calcium chloride and calcium sulfate. If you've decided that your chloride to sulfate ratio is perfect for the beer, it's just the clarity was off that you're trying to correct. So, keep in mind all the different, effects that mineral additions can have in planning out your additions.
Okay, let's take a break, and when we come back, we might have another question or two, and then we definitely have some questions from the chat room. And
all right.
If you're listening live, get in there and ask some questions. Back after this.
Keep your carboy cap on.
This is Brew Strong.
We'll be right back.
Williams Brewing is your online resource for prompt delivery of quality home brewing supplies. Since 1979, Williams Brewing has offered the finest equipment and freshest ingredients and the best customer service in the business. Cut hours off your brewing sessions by using one of their 11 varieties of famous Williams malt extract. Their Williams German Pils is mashed with pure German Moravian 2-row barley malt for a light blonde color and malty crispness you just can't get from other extracts. Or check out their unique fermenters, draft beer equipment, bottling aids, and more. They even have their own line of precision hydrometers. Go to williamsbrewing.com to browse their vast selection and enter promo code BREW at the order checkout for $5 off your next order over $50. Orders placed by 3 p.m. ship the same day. Again, go to williamsbrewing.com and enter promo code BREW at checkout for $5 off your next order. Brewing is easy the Williams way.
Nico, listen, our lawyers said that we had to do this for 1 hour, and after this, we don't have to talk to each other for 3 more months to the next meeting.
Kids, come on, let's get out of here.
I'm supposed to have more lines. I'm the professional. Hey, it's Sully.
And I'm Nico.
And we opened the 21st Amendment 9 years ago at 563 2nd Street in San Francisco, just 2 blocks from Giants Park, to make great beer and have a great time doing it.
That's right, because to us, the 21st Amendment is more than just the right to make beer. It's the right to experiment, to be innovative, and just do things differently. And so now, we're putting our craft beer in cans.
That's right, cans. You can find our world-famous Hell or High Watermelon Wheat Beer and Brew Free or Die IPA throughout California and Alaska.
And now it's also available on draft at select accounts in the Bay Area.
So next time you're at your local neighborhood pub or good beer store, be sure to ask for 21st Amendment in cans.
Because everyone likes it in a can.
Tasty crack cans.
Tasty crack can.
BN Army members, are you looking for a discount on hops? Keep listening. Nico's Homebrew Supply at nicobrew.com has hops by the ounce and by the pound. Choose from varieties like Amarillo, Centennial, East Kent Goldings, Hollertower, Simcoe, Summit, Tomahawk, Warrior, Willamette, and more. And adding new varieties all the time, many for less than $20 a pound. Whether a couple ounces at a time or an 11-pound bag, all hops are shipped vacuum sealed and frozen straight to you. Nico's Homebrew Supply offers store-wide $5 flat rate shipping and won't waste your money on unnecessary overhead or advertising. They're going bare bones and passing the savings on to you. The staff at Nico's Homebrew Supply loves to brew and is committed to keeping homebrewing affordable and accessible to anyone who wants to join in this great hobby. And for a limited time, use coupon code BNARMY at checkout for a Brewing Network discount. Visit nicobrew.com. That's N-I-K-O brew.com for your hops and more. nicobrew.com, your bare bones buddy in the brewing business.
You're listening to the Brewing Network.
Like the Lance Armstrong of the beer world. Except for that nut thing. This is Brew Strong.
All right, we're back. We're talking water here with my good buddy, John Palmer. And Jamel
Water
Sanchez.
Ganza Part 4.
It's the Ganza Palooza 4. You can't Ganza Palooza enough, if you ask me.
That's right. Yeah.
That's what we did this weekend at the Long Shot. And, the good guys from More Beer, they played a big role in the Long Shot every year. They handle all the incoming beer and process it and unpack it and label it and get it there, and it's all sequenced. And
the judging went really smoothly. I mean, the whole time.
Because, all the prep work that goes into it. They put, hundreds of hours into that thing before we even get there. And makes a big difference. And I really appreciate that, them doing that. And they do it pretty much out of the kindness of their heart, and for the past few years, and they're a great sponsor. They sponsor us, they keep us on the air, and very appreciative. So if you get a chance, go to morebeer.com and drop them an email, tell them how much you appreciate that, and maybe buy something when you get a chance, or when you're placing an order, you put a comment in there saying,
use that comment box on the order form.
Appreciate you sponsoring the Brew Network. Same thing for any of our sponsors. Downtown Joe's, info at downtownjoes.com, and say, hey, thanks a bunch. We really, we appreciate you helping us get this information for free. Otherwise, we'd have to charge you. I don't know what we were thinking. What was it? $9,000 a show, an episode. Yeah. You'd PayPal $9,000, and then you'd get an episode, something like that. So the Water Ganza, therefore, is worth like $36,000. We'd probably give you a deal, $35,000 for all 4 shows.
Yeah, there you go.
But so Downtown Joe's is saving you $35,000. So
yeah, throwing a bonus remark.
Yeah, that's right. Go buy a beer at Downtown Joe's. Anyways, back to our Ganza of questions. Soren, he had a question on, can you calculate where and how much of the calcium goes during the brewing process reactions? I'm sure you could. You could say, well, this goes here, then it goes there, and here's exactly what happens. But do we need to get into that detail, or?
Yeah, it's
or what are the parts that
there's so many. Yeah, there's so many different reactions going on during the brewing process. I mean, we know of a few of them. We know that the calcium is combining with malt phosphates and so on, and precipitating out, and some is being absorbed by the yeast and other reactions going on. And
and that freeze, it changes the acidity and all those. It's a very
really
complex process.
Yeah, it's a really complex system. I don't know that anybody knows the entire spectrum of reactions that go on. I mean, they've got a couple of the main ones defined. And even for the nomograph and for the spreadsheet, I'm working with basically one equation or one model of what goes on in the mash. I don't think the full system is really defined enough to be able to calculate everywhere the calcium goes, so we know exactly how much to add. We're still
you don't think somebody like Charlie Bamforth knows it?
It's a possibility, but he hasn't told me that he's solved it yet. So I'm assuming there's still some unknowns out there.
If anybody has some solid ideas, I would bet it would be him. Yeah,
that's right.
He's going to be at the NHC. We're both going to be there. The whole Brewing Network crew is going to be there at the Homebrew Conference, and including the competition, including the anniversary party right before the conference. It's going to be a grand old time. They even have the BN even has a couple of buses going on bus tour.
Wow. Not to slight NHCs of years past, but I think this year is just going to be incredible.
Beat the band. And Bamforth is going to be speaking at the judge reception. If you're a BJCP judge, you go to the bjcp.org, and they've got a link there. You can sign up for the judge reception. You're going to get a gourmet meal from the homebrew chef, Sean Paxton, paired with beer. And then there's going to be a talk by Charles Bamforth to the small group there. There's a limit of 150 people, so get your butt out there and sign up right away.
Yeah.
You can bring a guest, but the BJCP does not offset the cost for the guest. The guest pays full price, which is $26 in cost for the food.
Still, for one of Sean Paxton's dinners, oh my gosh!
Yeah, and then if you're a BJCP member, it's $10. The BJCP is taking $16 and paying that for you. So you sign up, and it's going to be a great time. And actually, Sven is the organizer for this. He stepped up and
he's doing a good job.
He's got that set. Yeah, this is going to be a great thing. You go to that thing, and then after that, work your way over to the Brewing Network anniversary party. It's going to be real close by there, just a few blocks away, and we're just going to have that. It's going to be one of the most incredible conferences ever. All right, so. Since it's a live show, we got live chat. You can get in there, you can ask some questions. And Justin, what do we got for the end of the Water Ganza?
All right, a few questions came through. One of our listeners says he has water with very little of anything in it. It does, however, have about 80 parts per million of bicarbonate, HCO3. If I'm brewing a pale lager, he asks, they say you want to have water with less than 50 parts per million bicarbonate. If I add CaCl2, calcium chloride,
right?
Look at me. Does the HCO3 go somewhere?
No, it doesn't really go anywhere. What you've done, though, is you've balanced the pH. You've balanced the effect that the bicarbonate has with calcium. And let me go back to those recommended levels of bicarbonate, to brew this, pale beers, amber beers, dark beers. Those recommendations were made before people, really started talking about the balance, the residual alkalinity effect. And so, yeah, if you're not if you're not going to understand the RA of the water and the effect it's going to have on what the beer color and the relationship there, then yeah, you can kind of draw a guideline and say, well, if your bicarbonate is below this much, then you should be able to brew a pale beer well. But so, with regard to his question, if his bicarbonate is 80 parts per million, yeah, that's fine. It could be 100, it could be 200. The key is to add enough hardness to balance that to get the right RA for the style of beer he wants to brew.
Okay, a couple more questions. E-Bone in the chat today has a couple questions for you. He wants to know, does adding potassium metabisulfate, Camden tablets, for dechlorination affect my RA or other ion concentrations in any way? Do I need to compensate?
No, it doesn't. When you add Camden tablets, sodium or potassium metabisulfite, what you to treat, say, 10, 20 gallons of water, what you end up with is maybe 10, 15 parts per million of sulfate resulting, and some chloride. Those two minerals, I mean, they affect flavor a little bit, but the 10 to 15 parts per million, for the whole batch is not going to affect flavor that much, and those don't enter into your RA calculation.
Okay. He also wants to know, I think he's addressing our third in the Water Ganza show. I want to know if you could go over some of the classic beer styles of the world and address the chloride to sulfate ratios in them. Could you be more specific than just on the sulfate side or on the chloride side? He's asking for specific ratios.
Well, if you look at that list of classic brewing cities, and you can look in Ray Daniels' book, you can look in my book, there's other...
How to Brew, page 160.
Yeah. I mean, there's various lists of what of these profiles for these cities. The numbers vary, but I'm looking at, let's see, if I look in, I guess like Jamil says, page 160, the chloride to sulfate ratio of Pilsen comes out at 1. For Dublin, it comes out to 2.5 for the sulfate side. That is 2.5 times as much sulfate as chloride. With Dortmund, you get a ratio of about 2 sulfate to chloride. Vienna Lager, I mean, that's kind of surprising looking at it. For as soft as that beer is, tastes. I mean, the sulfate to chloride there is 6 to 1.
And let me interrupt you. Where would you go to figure this out? How would you figure this out on your own?
Yeah.
So, for those who, want other cities that aren't in the book, where would you go? Where would you
go? You go to the internet.
And what would you look for?
Well, like when I was trying to get some information on Dusseldorf for the other gentleman's question. I just typed in Dusseldorf water report, and then I thought, well, I probably should translate that in German, so I used Babelfish to find out that water is Wasser and report is like Bericht or something like that. I don't know how to pronounce it, but I can type that in, do a Google search, and I pull up a document in German, and looks like a water report, and start reading through it, and here's the international symbol, chemical symbol for calcium. And
so it's not hard to find yourself, guys.
Yeah, you can get in, you look up the numbers and calculate it out.
The day we turn John Palmer into Google is I quit the BN. You can look this stuff up.
So, I mean, just get in there, look it up. Take the number with a grain of salt, because it may not be really accurate, but it gives you a ballpark to start with.
Okay, couple more questions that came through. This person wants to know, does decoction mashing change the water chemistry through concentrating or losing minerals?
Decoction mashing definitely lowers mash pH by a couple tenths, maybe even up to a half. You look in the decoction section of my book, because I think I addressed that. Don't quite remember off the top of my head, but as to how it changes it, I don't know the mechanism for sure. It could be greater release of starches, greater release of enzymes, or precipitation reactions that occur in during the boiling of the grist. Because there's some oxygen there, and those would combine with the calcium and phosphate to precipitate more of the calcium out, and maybe that's how it happens.
Okay.
Not real sure, but it definitely does have an effect.
All right, 2 more quick questions. Does fluoride pose a problem in brewing water?
Not that I know of.
No? Okay. And finally, Big Tex asks, how do you determine the volume of water that needs to be treated in the brew kettle? Is it total boil volume minus treated mash water?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Like we mentioned at the beginning, I mean, you think of this as you're more or less trying to emulate what a local brewer would have experienced. So you arrive at a mineral profile. You put in enough salts into your mash tun to mimic that water. You skip over the sparge, of it. I mean, you don't add salts during the sparge, but once you got all your water in the boil kettle, you want to make up for that sparge volume. So yeah, it's as you start your boil, take that total volume, subtract out how much of that water came from the mash, and put in enough salts to compensate to get an overall profile.
Well, and one thing to make clear is the reason you use the pre-boil volume in your boil kettle is because that's what the brewer in Burton-on-Trent would have been using. That's their local water made up that volume, and it gets concentrated down as well. So you're not looking at the final volume of your boil.
Right.
You're not measuring it off of the 5-gallon batch of wort that you're putting in a fermenter. You're measuring it off of your total pre-boil volume, and that's what needs to match.
Yeah, because we don't know what reactions are going to occur in the boil. We don't know how much evaporation is necessarily going to happen. Mm-hmm. All we know is that the local brewer would have used that water, and going into the boil kettle, he would have had that local water profile to start with. Mm-hmm. And then things happen, and fermentation happens, and then the beer happens.
Makes sense. That's it from the chat room, guys.
Great. Another great show in the Watergasm series, and I think we're done.
That's it. I hope that wraps up all the loose ends. If not, well,
email us and maybe we'll do another part 5. But coming up next, we're going to talk filtering and all the tricks of filtering. How you might get a nice clear beer.
Yes.
And we got a special guest in studio to help us out with that.
Our own Tasty McDole.
Yes. And if you get a chance, visit our sponsors, www.morebeer.com and downtownjoes.com. Again, they're down in downtown Napas. Stop by there, come out for the conference, and make sure you swing by Downtown Joe's and More Beer. And show them some love for showing us all the love and keeping this show going, and all the other fine programming on the Brew Network. It wouldn't be possible without our sponsors, and our sponsors won't keep ponying up the bucks if you guys don't show them that it has an effect on your behavior. So thanks for listening. Until next time, brew strong.
Brew strong, everybody.